Have you ever wondered what lies beyond the big, bustling airports you see in Africa's major cities? Beyond the bright lights of Johannesburg, Nairobi, and Addis Ababa, far away from the tourist terminals and control towers, there are other airports, forgotten, secret, and sometimes invisible. Hidden under thick forests, buried by dust, or quietly serving isolated communities, they tell stories no one has ever told. This is the untold story of Africa's hidden airports. And once you hear it, you'll never look at a map the same way again. Most people think of airports as symbols of progress. Glass terminals, control towers, and flashing runway lights that signal modern connectivity. But across Africa, there exists another kind of network. A shadow web of forgotten runways and isolated strips that once connected entire regions and now stand abandoned, silent, or repurposed for reasons few outside know. Each one carries history, some born in colonial ambition, others in war, survival, or hope. And all of them whisper of a different Africa, one that existed before global attention arrived. Let's begin by asking a simple question. Why are so many African airports hidden? Some are hidden not by secrecy, but by time. Decades ago, colonial powers built hundreds of small airstrips across the continent. They were essential lifelines, built to move goods, soldiers, and administrators across vast lands where roads were few. These airstrips were carved into jungles, deserts, and savannas, sometimes little more than packed dirt or gravel, but vital to imperial logistics. When independence came, many of these airstrips lost their purpose. Some were maintained, others forgotten. Over time, nature reclaimed them, governments lost track, and they faded from the official record. Yet others were hidden on purpose. Africa's vast geography, with its deep forests and endless deserts, became the perfect canvas for secret activity. During the Cold War, intelligence services and rebel groups alike sought isolated runways where eyes in the sky couldn't see. In some regions, airstrips became strategic tools for smuggling, for humanitarian aid, or even for covert diplomacy. These were airports with no names, no schedules, and no passengers. Only missions, often wrapped in silence. But not all hidden airports are sinister. Some are simply overlooked because of geography and neglect. In countries like the Democratic Republic of Congo, Chad, or South Sudan, massive distances separate communities. Remote runways serve as the only link to the outside world, bringing medicine, food, and aid to people unreachable by road. They are runways of survival. When the rain washes out bridges or conflict blocks roads, these hidden airstrips become the difference between life and death. Yet their existence is rarely known beyond local maps or pilot circles. Take, for instance, the story of an airfield in the Congolese rainforest, a strip so remote that trees have grown over the edges of its tarmac. Locals speak of it as a place where the world occasionally drops by, where the sound of a small plane echoes through the trees only once every few weeks. Nobody knows who built it, and yet for villages nearby, it represents connection, a chance for commerce, medicine, and hope. Across the continent, hundreds of similar strips exist, some known only to bush pilots who have memorized their coordinates, others lost entirely to vegetation and time. In Uganda, there is an airfield called Pakuba. Few outside the region have heard of it, but it once served as a major gateway to the country's north, near the stunning Murchison Falls National Park. It was used by visitors during better times and by pilots who braved unpredictable weather and wildlife to keep tourism alive. Today, it's quiet, partly functional, partly symbolic. Pakuba shows how airports can fade with political and economic shifts, yet still hold emotional value to the communities around them. In Kenya's arid Turkana region, there's another forgotten airstrip, Calicut Airport. It stands alone, surrounded by cracked earth and wind. It once connected fishermen, traders, and aid workers to Lake Turkana. For years, small aircraft landed there, delivering food and supplies. But when funds dried up, the runway went silent. The people remained, but their sky connection disappeared. For many, it's a reminder that infrastructure is not just concrete and steel. It's lifeblood. Hidden airports are not always relics. Some are still active but rarely discussed. In Tanzania, for example, small grass runways dot the landscape, serving missionaries, medical teams, and safari operators. Morogoro Airstrip is one such example. Modest and unpaved, yet vital for local mobility. It doesn't make headlines, but for pilots and passengers who depend on it, it's as critical as any international hub. Its simplicity reflects Africa's quiet aviation backbone, one that keeps moving people and goods far from the spotlight. Then, there are the airports that exist only on blueprints and government announcements, ambitious projects that remain hidden because they've yet to materialize. Kajunguti International Airport in Tanzania is one such dream, planned to boost trade and tourism in the Great Lakes region. Construction began with promise, but progress slowed. For now, it's more symbol than structure, a reminder of the gap between Africa's aspirations and its realities. Many such projects exist, airports half-built, half-dreamed, and half-forgotten. So, what makes airports disappear? The reasons are complex. Some vanish because they outlive their purpose. Others fall victim to nature's persistence. Sand swallowing runways in Niger, forests overtaking airfields in Congo, water flooding strips near river deltas. Maintenance costs soar, while government priorities shift. In places where poverty, conflict, or corruption weigh heavily, keeping a remote runway open becomes impossible. And so, quietly, they vanish, erased not by policy, but by neglect. There are also political reasons behind disappearance. In war zones, runways can be dangerous assets. Rebel groups seize them for supply drops. Governments destroy or abandon them to prevent enemy use. And yet, despite abandonment, they matter. In regions where modern infrastructure is scarce, a dirt strip can be a miracle. Imagine being in a remote village where the nearest hospital is hundreds of kilometers away, and a single-engine plane is the only way to reach it. For humanitarian pilots, these forgotten runways are lifelines. They allow medical evacuations, vaccine deliveries, and emergency aid drops. In places like South Sudan, Somalia, and Mali, thousands of lives depend on airstrips that don't appear on official maps. Hidden airports also serve conservation and tourism. Across Kenya, Botswana, and Namibia, small airstrips inside national parks allow researchers, rangers, and tourists to reach places that would otherwise be inaccessible. They protect wildlife by enabling rapid response to poaching and disease outbreaks. These are airports with no terminals, no security gates, no gift shops, just rough terrain, a windsock, and a pilot brave enough to land. But without them, entire ecosystems could be cut off from the world. Of course, not every hidden runway serves noble purposes. Some have darker stories. In parts of West and Central Africa, isolated airstrips are used for smuggling of minerals, weapons, and sometimes humans. In regions where governance is weak, such airstrips become invisible highways for the underground economy. They are symbols of how infrastructure can be twisted, how the same strip that could deliver medicine might also move contraband. Governments often deny their existence or claim ignorance. The truth, as always, lies in the shadows. Technology, however, is changing the game. Satellite imagery, open-source intelligence, and drone mapping are exposing what was once hidden. Enthusiasts, journalists, and researchers are identifying forgotten runways through online maps and historical archives. The Internet is becoming a new frontier for discovery. Many secret airstrips are now visible to anyone with curiosity and time. Yet even with exposure, their stories remain largely untold. Because what matters most is not the coordinates, but the people connected to them. For every hidden airport, there is a human story. Pilots who once risked landing on broken runways to deliver vaccines. Engineers who built strips out of nothing but gravel and hope. villagers who still look to the sky whenever they hear a distant engine. These airports may not appear in glossy brochures, but they define resilience. They represent the unspoken bond between Africa's geography and its people. The silent faith that no matter how remote, connection is still possible. The future of these airports remains uncertain. Some will continue to fade, swallowed by trees and time. Others may be reborn as tourism or logistics hubs. In some countries, governments are now re-evaluating old strips to expand regional connectivity. With Africa's growing population and economy, regional aviation could experience a renaissance. But that future depends on vision, investment, and will. Without them, the silent airstrips will stay silent, stories buried in dust. There's also a moral question. Who owns these forgotten places? Many of the old colonial strips sit on land that now belongs to local communities. Some want them revived. Others see them as relics of foreign control. Restoring a runway might mean displacing farmers or cutting through wildlife zones. The politics of land and memory make revival complicated. What seems like a simple airstrip on a satellite image is, in truth, a web of rights, histories, and emotions. Still, Africa's hidden airports hold potential beyond nostalgia. They could serve as emergency evacuation points during disasters, as drone hubs for medicine delivery, or as regional connectors for trade. The question is whether anyone will act before they disappear completely. Because for every airport that fades, an opportunity fades with it. An opportunity for connection, for growth, for saving lives. There's a strange beauty in imagining the continent's forgotten runways. Somewhere in a desert, the wind blows across cracked tarmac where planes once roared. Somewhere in a forest, vines curl around old runway markers. Somewhere in the mountains, a shepherd still remembers the day a white plane descended like a miracle. These images are not just memories. They're metaphors for Africa's journey. It struggles with visibility, its balance between tradition and modernization, and its ongoing story of resilience. To truly understand Africa's hidden airports is to understand Africa itself. Complex, layered, full of contradictions. Progress and neglect live side by side. Wealth and poverty share the same sky. The same infrastructure that can uplift a nation can also become its forgotten ghost. These runways are not just about planes, they're about people, politics, and possibility. So, the next time you fly over Africa, look closer. Beneath the clouds, you might see faint lines cutting through the wilderness. They could be the remains of a forgotten airfield, or perhaps one still quietly alive, waiting for a reason to roar again. And if you ever visit a place where the world seems distant, remember that somewhere nearby, there might be an old runway, a silent witness to decades of history, longing to be rediscovered. Africa's hidden airports are more than old pieces of concrete. They are the continent's forgotten arteries. They carried hope, war, ambition, and survival. They remind us that connection is not just about technology, it's about willpower. They remind us that even the most isolated corners once had wings. And most importantly, they remind us that sometimes the most powerful stories are the ones that were never meant to be seen. If you've made it this far, take a moment to think about the unseen Africa. The one behind the news headlines and travel brochures. The one filled with runways overgrown by grass and dreams waiting to take off again. Because somewhere in that silence, the next chapter of Africa's aviation story is waiting. Hidden,